David, we're just going to start today with what's the difference between being highly sensitive, empathic, and intuitive?
Okay, so we've got quite a conundrum of all different things here. So when we go to highly sensitive, when you add highly sensitive, you also have to add one extra genre, and that's hypersensitive. Okay, so the biggest thing is with highly sensitive people, it's where we have to define that we actually use our senses for a start. Yeah, because a lot of people don't define that we actually use loads and loads of senses all the time. when when we go through life, we sometimes have a little bit of stress, a little bit of trauma. Also, we have we can also inherit a lot of different areas of stuff that your parents or whoever before you has gone through. When that comes into the equation, what happens is for highly sensitive people, we tend to have some parts of our senses because we don't just have a sense. we have we've got multiples and multiples. We've got millions of senses, yeah. So what happens is we have some that are working quite well. We have some that aren't working quite so well. And what happens is um, all of a sudden we start to find different areas that are working, different areas that aren't working. So the ones that aren't working, um, we aren't always assured that they aren't working. Yeah. So
Mm.
it's when we become highly sensitive is we're using a totally different language. And that's we've got to start from the very beginning. So if we go to highly sensitive people, first of all, you're using your information that comes from your intuition and your instinct, firstly and foremostly. And
Mm.
of course, that's a totally different language than your physical language. Yeah.
Yes.
So the thing is, we switch between the two. Yeah. So we have highly sensitive information that is your intuition and instinct, your physical information. And when when you're picking up highly sensitive information, that's when we sometimes can't delineate which is which. Does that make sense?
Can you explain more? Because a part of me is wondering, there's empathic, is that being more
Yeah,
emotional
I'll
versus,
go to that in a minute. So when we're just listening to our highly sensitive self, that's when we're really quite in tune with ourself. Yeah, because it uses a totally different language because it's an energy that comes from your spirit. So all highly sensitive energy, we use our intuition and instinctive energy. Yeah.
yeah,
And all those energies have to make big cycles. So as they make big cycles, and that's why we get people to ground to actually get them to move, which means that you start to notice what are you messages and what aren't you messages. But highly sensitive people are just where you have energy that is your intuitive and instinctive energy, and which is your physical. And then you have trouble delineating which is which. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's as simple as that. So once you learn how to tune in to the coherence or excuse me, the consciousness of your highly sensitive energy, and you learn to use that highly sensitive energy is completely and absolutely different to just physical energy because when we start, we give everybody that exercise and it's the very first thing we do. We just say, here, can you feel the energy between your fingers?
Yeah.
And that's not physical energy, that's intuitional. It's it's not physical energy, yeah.
Yep.
But it's the one that delivers the information of what's really going on in your whole life, really.
Yep. Yep.
So, and then what happens is if you've had a bit of stress, your senses turn off. And when your senses turn off or detune, some detune, some turn off completely.
Mm.
If you've had a heck of a lot of stress or trauma, then they really do turn off. Or if your parents have had a lot of trauma, certain senses turn off. So that means that you've got a block of senses that are working,
Yeah.
another block that aren't. But if you've got certain senses turned off, it's like you you only have part of the sense story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like you have either a reactive or a responsive version, a lead in or a lead out. So you've got
Mm.
all these different versions, but when you're highly sensitive, you may have when you it's a bit like sometimes you're asking your your ear to tell you what your nose is doing or what your toe is doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they don't all coordinate.
Mm.
So
Mm.
when you're highly sensitive, you can go hypersensitive where you're also using um you sense that there's a lot of stuff that's really turned off. And when senses are really turned off, that's when you're a bit like the cat on on a hot tin roof. And it's like every time you sense something, it's like someone will drop a book or something and you almost jump through your roof. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when you're hypersensitive, which means that you have a load of senses turned off. The senses that you are remaining, they're just the ones that you're starting to you're just relying on.
Mm.
So the thing is, when we work, as you realize, the first thing we do, we get your energetics to move, which moves your
Yeah.
senses. And
Mm.
then you become, instead of like an incoherent, highly sensitive person, you become a coherent, highly sensitive person. Then all of a sudden your senses do what? Ah, you start to relax because when you use coherent energy, you get all the information, and then you're not like this cat on a hot tin roof. Your body has more information. So what do? You relax. I
Mm.
know it's completely counterintuitive to what everybody tells you. Don't don't have turn everything down, detune everything, but it's completely the opposite, isn't it? When you learn to turn things on, all of a sudden it's like, what happens? You just relax.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're attuned, but in a much more neutral, present way.
Yeah, you
Not
are.
not startle response or something with,
No, you're not in
yeah.
fight or flight.
No, no, it's
And you're
very,
not,
very different.
yeah, very different. And then if we go to what's the difference between what is empathic, um, we actually have an empathic body, okay, which works on, we have different sympathetic bodies, parasympathetic bodies, yeah. So it means that your what happens is when your senses um, detune, they invert. So if you've had a lot of trauma, oversensitivity, if your parents, one of your parents is highly sensitive, what happens is your senses actually invert in certain areas. Now, then we're not talking physical senses, we're talking um, your spirit senses and your intuitional and instinctive senses. They invert. So imagine instead of all those senses facing inwards, all of a sudden they face outwards, and then you can be somewhere and all of a sudden someone will just say something and it'll just set you off really quickly because what happens is you go up to somebody, and when you go up to somebody, what do? Everybody scans. So everyone has these little scanning sensors that is one of the first things we teach people, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it's um, it's quite an eye opener when you sense that you scan people so much. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's like you know what someone's like and what where they fit in life. It's they're nice, they're a little bit dodgy, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to take advantage, blah, blah, blah. And we can get really close by that. And that person hasn't even opened their mouth. But we do that by people scanning. So highly empathic people are really heavy scanners because, in a way, you're also looking for oh, is that person after me? Am I going to, you know, how you have reactions, responses to everybody else? Then naturally you're going to have a reaction or response to everybody else. So when it comes to empathic bodies, they're a totally different genre. Yeah. So
Mm.
it's where you learn that you have this empathic body and you draw all those different senses and all those different scanners and you draw them all the ways back in. So what it also means is you're not walking out in a fight or flight or a fear mode because in a way you're hypersensitive walking around saying, oh, where's that stuff coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so as soon as you change that, you just relax.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the biggest things was the idea of scanning outward the senses or the emotions even. Because a lot of
Mm,
times when I think about, you've re-educated me about sort of the empathic bodies, but being empathic, I used to be very tuned into everyone's emotions and they affected my emotions versus my
yeah.
senses, or so I thought. And people would speak in a room about something and I would be like, oh, like
Yeah.
responding
Because
emotionally or something.
because that's the thing. And we all think that all those emotions and all those feelings relate to us when 99% of the time they don't.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
then what happens is then we don't read ourselves. Yeah.
yeah.
We don't read our own empathy or where we should care for ourselves because we're too busy looking at everything else. Yeah.
Well, that turn the scanners being focused in and
Mm.
attuning to us and orienting around that is so central. Like it's a whole paradigm shift I found versus the being so attuned to the outside.
Yeah. And of course, there's with that, as we move on and as you go through and you do the courses, you find there's all these different senses that have been, boy, they've been either sitting out there, they're facing outwards, and then eventually we find that there's a lot of other stuff as well that's not how you think it is.